Amara lived in the small, sun-soaked town of Nkuruma, where red dust danced with the wind and laughter echoed from wooden stalls along the road. She was a quiet girl with tired but gentle eyes, always busy helping her aunt run a small catering business. Every day before the sun rose, she tied her scarf, rolled up her sleeves, and began her work, washing plates, carrying heavy pots, and serving food at weddings and parties she could never afford to attend as a guest. While others her age dreamed about fashion or travel, Amara's dreams were simple: to see her aunt smile without worry, to one day have shoes that didn't hurt her feet, and to live a life where she was seen, not just useful. Even in her plain clothes and worn slippers, there was something graceful about her. The way she moved, the quiet dignity in how she greeted everyone, even those who looked down on her. People often overlooked her, but those who watched closely could see a light in her, the kind that hardship couldn't put out. Amara didn't know it yet, but her story was about to change in the most unexpected and unforgettable way. When Amara's aunt received a huge catering contract for a wedding in Abadeo City, it felt like a dream come true. It was the biggest event her small business had ever been chosen for. Everyone in Nkuruma was talking about it. The bride was from a rich family, the groom's people were powerful, and the guest list was filled with politicians, business owners, and celebrities. For Amara's aunt, this was a chance to finally prove her worth in a city where small-town caterers were rarely respected. In the days leading up to the wedding, their small kitchen was full of noise: the clatter of pots, the smell of frying spices, and the laughter of workers rushing against time. Amara worked harder than ever. Her hands ached from scrubbing pots, her back hurt from carrying sacks of rice, but she didn't complain. Deep down, she was happy to help. She wanted her aunt's name to shine. When they finally arrived in Abadeo City, Amara could hardly believe her eyes. The streets were wide and polished, lined with flowers and tall buildings that touched the clouds. The wedding venue looked like a palace. Chandeliers glittered through the glass windows, white tents stretched across the lawn, and elegant guests stepped out of shiny cars dressed in gold and lace. Everything felt like a movie she didn't belong in. Her aunt quickly divided the team. Some would serve food, others would handle setup, and Amara was assigned to the washing and cleanup area behind the hall. It was hot, noisy, and hidden from view, but she didn't mind. She loved watching people, how they laughed, danced, and celebrated love. As she worked, she wondered what it must feel like to wear a beautiful dress and walk into a place like that, not as a worker, but as someone special. She didn't know that fate was already preparing a seat for her, one she never imagined would have her name on it. As Amara helped arrange the tables and spread white cloths under the bright Abadeo sun, she couldn't help but look around in quiet wonder. Everything about the wedding felt grand: the soft music, the scent of fresh flowers, the shimmer of gold decorations. Guests were arriving one after another, smiling and taking pictures in their elegant attires. Amara kept her head down, wiping the tables carefully, trying not to draw attention. But then something, or rather someone, caught her eye. Across the lawn, standing near a group of men in fine agbadas, was the groom, Tamawa. He was tall and calm-looking, his cream outfit glowing softly under the sunlight. There was something warm in his presence, something that didn't match the arrogance Amara often saw in wealthy men. For a brief moment, his eyes lifted and met hers. It lasted only a heartbeat, but to Amara it felt like time stopped. Her breath caught. The sound of laughter and music faded. She quickly looked away, embarrassed, her heart racing. She told herself it meant nothing, just an accident. But even as she bent to fix a chair, her mind replayed that one look again and again. On the other side, Tamawa also seemed thoughtful. Something about her face tugged at his memory. A familiar calmness, a quiet kindness he couldn't place. He didn't know who she was, but he felt as if he'd seen those eyes before. Around Amara, the other servers giggled and whispered, teasing her. "You better stop staring, dish girl," one said under her breath. "That man's family probably owns this whole place." Amara smiled faintly, pretending not to care, though her cheeks burned. She knew her place, the girl behind the dishes, the invisible helper. But as she glanced one last time at Tamawa, a strange feeling grew in her chest, something between curiosity, hope, and fear, as if destiny itself had just looked back at her. The laughter of the other servers echoed around Amara like sharp little stones. She was trying to stay focused, arranging plates and wiping trays, but their words cut through the air like whispers meant to wound. "Don't stare too long, dish girl," one said with a smirk. Men like him don't even see girls like you. Another added, you better remember why you're here. You're not a guest, you're staff. They laughed, nudging each other, their voices dripping with mock pity. Amara tried to smile, tried to act like their words didn't touch her, but inside, she felt a sting she couldn't hide. Her chest felt tight. She kept her eyes low, pretending to be busy with a stack of plates, though her hands trembled slightly. It wasn't the first time people mocked her. She'd grown up hearing things like that. Poor girl. Village type. No future. But for some reason this time it hurt differently. Maybe because for the first time in a long while someone like Tamawa had actually looked at her. Not as a worker, not as a nobody, but as if she existed. As the laughter continued, she quietly stepped aside, walking toward the back of the tent. She rinsed her hands under the tap, the cold water mixing with the warmth of her tears. She tried to blink away. She looked at her reflection in the small bucket beside her, her scarf slightly tilted, her face shiny with sweat. Why do I care? She whispered to herself. People like me don't belong in stories like theirs. But deep down, another voice spoke softly inside her heart. Maybe not yet. She straightened her scarf, wiped her face, and forced a small smile. She wasn't going to give anyone the satisfaction of seeing her break. What she didn't know was that the same man they told her to forget, the one she was being mocked for looking at, would soon be the reason her entire life turned upside down. The afternoon heat inside the wedding hall was unbearable. The servers had been running around for hours, carrying trays, setting dishes, and smiling for guests who barely noticed them. Suddenly, one of the girls, Bola, dropped the tray she was holding and collapsed near the buffet table. Everyone gasped as glasses shattered and juice splashed across the floor. The hall fell silent for a second before chaos broke out. Amara rushed over, kneeling beside her. She's burning up, she said softly, fanning Bola with her scarf. The supervisor, looking panicked and sweaty, barked orders at the others. We can't stop serving. Someone has to take her place. Quick. His eyes fell on Amara. You look neat enough. Take the drinks inside. Amara froze. Me? But I'm supposed to. No time. Go, he snapped, handing her a silver tray filled with tall glasses of juice that sparkled under the lights. Her heart raced as she wiped her palms on her apron. She'd never stepped into the main hall before, the place where the rich guests sat laughing, taking photos and clinking glasses. The moment she entered, her breath caught. The hall looked like a dream. Golden lights hanging from the ceiling, flowers floating in crystal vases, soft music filling the air. Everything shimmered. Trying not to trip, she walked carefully between the tables, offering drinks. Her hands trembled slightly, but she kept her smile steady. Guests reached out politely, some not even looking at her. Every few seconds she caught her reflection in the glass walls and barely recognized herself. The shy girl from Kuruma, serving in a hall that looked like heaven. Then as she turned to refill a guest's cup, her eyes met his again. Tamawa, the groom. He was standing near the stage talking to an older man. His expression softened the moment he saw her, his words faltering. Amara quickly looked away, her cheeks warm, pretending to focus on her tray. She didn't know that one small twist of fate, a fainty. Tamawa's eyes followed Amara as she moved between the tables, offering drinks with quiet grace. There was something about her. Not just her beauty, but her calmness, her gentle way of lowering her eyes when spoken to. He felt an ache of recognition, the kind that tugs at the back of your memory but won't say why. For a while he couldn't focus on anything else. The music, the laughter, the flashing cameras, it all blurred around him. He just kept wondering, where have I seen her before? Later, when the ceremony paused and guests moved around chatting, Tamawa found himself near the refreshment table again. Amara was there refilling glasses. He hesitated, unsure if he should speak, but something in his heart pushed him forward. Excuse me, he said softly. She looked up, startled, her hands frozen mid-pour. You, he said slowly, studying her face. Were you once at Oyo Market years ago? Amara blinked in surprise. Oyo Market, she repeated. Then a small smile of realization spread across her face. You're the boy who fell from the cart. His eyes widened. Yes, that was you. The girl who helped me when everyone else just watched. Memories flooded back. He had been about 12, a city boy visiting his uncle's shop, when he slipped and scraped his knee badly. People passed by, but a small girl had rushed over, cleaned his wound with her handkerchief, and stayed until he stopped crying. He never even got her name. "I never forgot that day," he said softly. "You were kind when no one else cared." Amara looked down, her heart fluttering. "It was nothing," she murmured. "Anyone would have helped." But Tamawa shook his head gently. "Not everyone would have. You did." Their eyes met again, and this time the look lingered. Neither of them noticed the stares from across the room, nor the jealous eyes watching from behind the stage. Destiny had just reintroduced two hearts that were never meant to be strangers. From across the hall, Fadik stood like a queen surrounded by her bridesmaids, her golden dress glittering under the lights. Everything about her screamed perfection. The flawless makeup, the diamond earrings, the confidence in every step. But when she noticed Tamawa talking to one of the servers, her smile slowly faded. Her eyes narrowed. That quiet girl holding a tray. Why was her groom talking to her with such warmth? "Who is that?" she asked sharply, turning to one of the planners. "That servant, who is she?" The planner stuttered. "Just one of the catering girls, ma." Fadik's expression hardened. "Then why is she standing so close to my fiancé? Tell them to keep her out of sight. I don't want distractions in my wedding." Her voice dripped with jealousy and pride. Even the bridesmaids exchanged uneasy glances, but no one dared to argue. Within minutes, one of the supervisors walked up to Amara. "You go back to the kitchen," he said coldly. Amara's smile faded, confusion filling her eyes. "But I was told to serve." "Not anymore," he interrupted. "The bride doesn't want you seen." The word stung like a slap. She nodded silently, trying to hold herself together. Her throat burned as she carried the empty tray back to the kitchen area. Once behind the curtain where no one could see, she finally let out a shaky breath. Her hands trembled as she picked up a sponge and began washing dishes again. The sound of laughter and music from the hall echoing faintly through the walls. Tears slipped down her cheeks, mixing with the soap and water. She felt small again, like she had been foolish for even believing she could belong in that space for a moment. But as she looked out through the tiny opening in the curtain, she caught one last glimpse of Tamawa's face, and though she couldn't hear him, she saw the worry in his eyes. Something in her heart whispered that this wasn't the end of their story. It was only the storm before the miracle. As the band began to play soft music and guests took their seats, an uneasy feeling started to spread through the grand wedding hall. Everything looked perfect. The flowers, the lights, the shimmering gold decorations. Yet something felt off. The groom, Tamawa, stood at the front beside the officiant, dressed elegantly in his cream agbada, but his face told another story. His smile was faint, his eyes distant, and his hands clenched together like a man fighting a storm inside. First, people didn't notice. The hall was full of laughter and excitement, but slowly the atmosphere shifted. A few guests began to whisper. "Why does he look so tense?" one woman murmured behind her fan. "Maybe it's nerves," another replied, but even she didn't sound convinced. Fadik, the bride, stood near the entrance, glowing with pride and dressed like royalty. But as she walked toward him, her eyes caught his blank expression. Her smile faltered. The whispers grew louder. Cameras kept flashing, but every photo captured the same thing. A groom who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Even the officiant noticed the tension. "Are you ready, my son?" he asked kindly. Tamawa nodded, forcing another smile, but his eyes briefly searched the crowd, almost as if he was looking for someone. Behind the curtain near the kitchen door, Amara was still washing dishes, unaware of the confusion building inside. She could faintly hear the music changing, the murmur of voices, and the soft ringing of glasses. Her aunt walked past, whispering, "Something's not right in there." In the hall the air grew heavier. Guests began to exchange puzzled glances. Some of Tamawa's relatives whispered among themselves, others looked at Fadik's father in concern. The bride's face was stiff with anger and embarrassment, and in that charged silence, between the music and the murmurs, Destiny stood waiting. Something deep inside Tamawa was pushing him toward a decision that would shock everyone in that. The music faded, and the hall fell quiet as the moment everyone had been waiting for finally arrived. The vows. The officiant smiled warmly, holding the microphone. "Now the groom will take his vows," he said. All eyes turned to Tamawa. The cameras zoomed in. Guests leaned forward, ready to capture the perfect moment, but Tamawa didn't move. He stood frozen, his hands shaking slightly, his eyes fixed somewhere far away. "Sir?" the officiant prompted softly, but Tamawa didn't answer. Fadik turned toward him, confusion flashing across her face. "Tamawa?" she whispered under her breath, forcing a smile for the cameras. He didn't respond. A strange, heavy silence filled the room. The air felt thick. Everyone could feel something breaking. Finally, Tamawa lifted the microphone. His voice trembled at first, then grew steady. "I can't do this," he said. A ripple of gasps moved through the crowd. "I can't marry someone who looks down on others. Marriage should be built on kindness and respect, not pride and cruelty." The hall erupted in murmurs. Some guests covered their mouths, others stared in disbelief. Fadik's face went pale. "What are you saying?" she demanded, her voice sharp with panic. Tamawa looked at her sadly. "I'm saying my heart belongs elsewhere. I have already met the woman who truly carries grace. Someone whose heart is pure even when her hands are dirty from hard work." Cameras flashed wildly. The officiant tried to calm the crowd, but it was useless. The wedding had turned into chaos. Fadik's family stood in shock, whispering furiously. Guests began recording, whispering, "Did you hear that? He's calling off the wedding." Meanwhile, behind the curtain, Amara dropped the glass she was washing. It shattered at her feet. Her aunt looked up, startled. "What's wrong?" she asked, but Amara couldn't speak. Her heart raced as she listened to the noise rising from the hall. She didn't know what was happening yet, but somehow deep inside she felt the noise in the hall suddenly stopped, as if the whole world had taken a deep breath and held it. Every camera, every eye, every whisper turned toward the back of the hall. People craned their necks, phones lifted in the air, flashes blinking like stars. And there, standing half hidden behind the curtain, was Amara. She still had a wet plate in her hand, soap bubbles sliding slowly down her fingers. Her apron was damp, her scarf slightly loose from all the work. She looked stunned, frozen in place, her wide eyes locked on Tamawa. For a moment she thought she must be dreaming. Her heart pounded so loudly she could hear nothing else. The guests began whispering again. "Is that her? That's the girl he's talking about. The kitchen help?" Their voices mixed with the sharp clicks of cameras, as people tried to capture the unbelievable moment. Tamawa's gaze never left her. He took a few steps forward, his cream agbada swaying gently as he moved. The silence deepened, the kind that made even the chandeliers seem to stop shining. Amara wanted to run. Her mind screamed, "This can't be real." But her feet wouldn't move. Her hands trembled as she slowly set the plate down, water dripping onto the floor. Her aunt stood behind her, shocked beyond words, one hand covering her mouth. Fadik's face twisted with disbelief. "Tamawa, stop this madness!" she shouted, her voice echoing painfully in the quiet hall. But Tamawa didn't turn. He was walking toward Amara now, steady and sure. Tears welled in Amara's eyes. Everything felt unreal, the lights, the murmurs, the flashes. She had spent the whole day serving others, unseen, unheard, and now the entire hall was watching her. The girl who washed dishes, the one everyone overlooked. In that breathless silence, as Tamawa stopped in front of her, destiny stood still, waiting to speak through the most unexpected soul in the room. Tamawa took a deep breath and began walking down the aisle, his every step echoing through the silent hall. The crowd parted slowly, eyes wide, phones raised, hearts racing. Fadik stood frozen at the altar, disbelief and anger flashing across her face, while whispers rippled through the guests like waves. But Tamawa didn't stop. His eyes were fixed only on one person, Amara. Amara stood trembling, her fingers still wet, her heart pounding so loudly it drowned out the noise around her. She didn't understand what was happening. Every step he took toward her felt unreal, like something from a dream too bold to believe. When he finally stopped in front of her, the whole room seemed to disappear. It was just the two of them, the groom and the girl who had spent her life serving others. Tamawa's voice broke the silence, calm but full of emotion. "Years ago I met this woman," he began, his gaze never leaving her. "I was just a boy who fell and hurt myself and no one cared. But she stopped. She helped me, comforted me, and treated me with kindness when she had nothing to gain. That day I never forgot her face. Today by fate I found her again." Gasps filled the hall. Some guests covered their mouths, others whispered in disbelief. "He's talking about the dish girl," one man murmured. Fadik's eyes filled with tears. Not of sorrow but of fury. Tamawa turned to the crowd, his voice steady. I can't marry someone who looks down on others. I choose the woman whose heart is pure, even when her hands are tired and dirty from hard work. I choose Amara. The hall erupted, shock, whispers, even claps. Cameras flashed wildly as Amara stood frozen, her tears finally spilling over. She couldn't speak. Her voice was lost in the storm of emotions. All she could do was look at him, the man who saw her when no one else ever had. And in that single moment, the girl who washed dishes became the woman everyone would never forget. The hall exploded into noise. Guests gasped, others shouted, and a few even stood up from their seats to see better. Some clapped with excitement, others whispered behind their hands in disbelief. Is this a joke? One woman hissed. The girl from the kitchen? Another asked, shaking her head. Yet, a few smiled softly, touched by what they'd just witnessed. That's real love, someone whispered. That's Grace. Fadique's face was pale with shock. Her friends gathered around her, whispering frantically, but she pushed them away, humiliated and trembling. She couldn't believe this was happening, that in front of hundreds of people, she had just been replaced by a servant girl. Cameras kept flashing, capturing her rage and Tamawa's calm, steady face. Meanwhile, at the back of the hall, Amara's aunt stood frozen for a few seconds before she understood what had just happened. Then, overwhelmed, she dropped to her knees, tears pouring down her face. God, is this real? She cried softly, her hands trembling. The same girl she had brought from a small town, who washed dishes and carried pots, was now being called the bride. She covered her face, weeping in disbelief and joy. Amara, still standing where Tamawa had stopped before her, felt her whole body shaking. She didn't know whether to cry or smile. She could still hear people whispering, some mocking, some amazed. But none of it mattered anymore. The man standing before her wasn't ashamed to choose her in front of everyone. The officiant, though clearly stunned, tried to regain control of the moment. Well, he said awkwardly into the microphone, it seems destiny has made its choice. A few guests laughed nervously, but others clapped louder now, some even cheering. In that chaotic, unforgettable moment, Amara realized that everything she had ever endured, the long days, the mockery, the tears, had all been leading to this. She had been invisible her whole life, but today the world was finally seeing her, and weeks later the story had spread everywhere, on social media, in newspapers, even on local radio stations. The groom who chose the dish girl, they called it. Photos from their small traditional wedding filled the internet, and every picture told a story no one could ignore. Amara, once the quiet girl who washed plates behind a kitchen wall, now stood like a queen, wrapped in golden lace that shimmered under the sun. Her smile was gentle, her eyes filled with grace, gratitude, and disbelief. She still looked like herself, but now there was a glow about her, the glow of someone finally seen, finally valued. People who once mocked her story now couldn't stop talking about it. Old neighbors in Kuruma showed her photos proudly, saying, "We knew that girl. She used to help her aunt at weddings." The same girls who had laughed at her that day in Abadeo shared her pictures online with long captions about destiny and grace. Even strangers from other cities reposted her story, calling it a modern fairy tale. But for Amara, life wasn't about fame or attention. In quiet moments, she still helped her aunt's business grow, insisting that they keep their catering service running. Only now they had more customers than ever before. People trusted the Bride of Grace, as the media called her. On the day of their wedding celebration, Tamawa looked at her with pride and said softly, "You see, Amara? The world finally knows what I saw in you that day." She smiled shyly, tears shining in her eyes. "I still can't believe it," she whispered. The hall was filled with laughter, dancing, and blessings. And though their wedding wasn't the grand one planned before, it was full of something richer: love, humility, and peace. Amara's journey had turned from mockery to miracle, from silence to story. She was living proof that grace can turn the lowest place into a throne. Across cities, towns, and tiny villages, Amara's story spread like wildfire. People whispered it in markets, repeated it in schools, and shared it endlessly on their phones. They made her wash plates at the wedding, they said, but she walked out as the bride. Every version carried the same message: destiny can't be hidden, and grace always finds its way. Videos of the moment Tamawa stopped the wedding were shared millions of times. People gasped, cried, and commented things like, "This is what true love looks like." And God can turn shame into a crown in one moment. News blogs called her the girl who redefined class, while magazines wrote headlines like From Dishwater to Diamond. Her story became a symbol of hope, especially for people who had been overlooked or mocked for their humble beginnings. In the streets of Abadeo, young girls began calling each other Amara, whenever someone stood up for herself with dignity. Even in churches, pastors used her story as an example of divine favor. And back in her hometown, elders sat under the mango trees telling children, "Never look down on anyone, because tomorrow might surprise you." Amara herself stayed calm through it all. She didn't chase the fame or let the attention change her heart. Instead, she used her story to inspire others. She started a small foundation that helped young women learn skills, sewing, catering, and event work, so no one would ever feel trapped by where they started. One evening, as she sat on her porch watching the sunset with Tamawa beside her, he smiled and said, "You've become a legend, Amara." She laughed softly and replied, "Not a legend, just proof that kindness never goes unnoticed." And so her name became a living reminder that sometimes, life's greatest blessings begin in the most unexpected places, even behind a sink full of dishes. Amara's story became more than just a viral moment. It became a lesson that touched hearts everywhere. People said she proved that grace can't be hidden, no matter how humble the beginning. From washing dishes in a small town to walking down the aisle as a bride, her journey reminded everyone that life can change in a single heartbeat. She showed that kindness, patience, and quiet strength are far more powerful than pride or beauty. Her humility made her unforgettable. She never boasted, never tried to prove herself. She simply stayed true to who she was. And in the end, that was what set her apart. Those who once mocked her now used her name as a symbol of hope. Be like Amara, they would say, meaning keep your head high, keep your heart pure, and trust that your moment will come. Even years later, her story was still told in classrooms, churches, and homes. Mothers told their daughters about her. Men admired her courage. And Amara, now living a peaceful life with Tamawa, often smiled when she heard her story being shared. She never imagined she would inspire so many. Her life became a timeless reminder that destiny doesn't care about titles or riches. It finds those with beautiful hearts. Amara's name would forever stand as a legend of quiet dignity, unshakable faith, and the miracle of being seen when the world least expects it.